While Nvidia gave the proverbial middle finger to gamers at this year's Computex, AMD kicked off their keynote laser-focused on gaming. Now that's a welcome change. Unfortunately, AMD has gulped the AI rendering narrative that Nvidia started by the gallon and are dead set on giving gamers the poor man's version of DLSS and RTX that no one asked for. Now with FSR Redstone, the latest evolution of the FSR suite of effects. Are gamers asking for more fake frames? I would think gamers are asking for better and cheaper hardware, not ways around actually putting in the work to make better and cheaper hardware. But what do I know? After the debacle with the 9070 cards earlier this year, this time AMD scheduled their keynote 2 days ahead of Nvidia's, so that they would have the time to price the 9060 cards in line with their rivals' recently launched 5060s. And the way AMD announces and prices their products makes it abundantly clear that they have given up competing with Nvidia, and unfortunately for gamers, this Computex is further evidence of that. But perhaps the 9060 cards are worth a look, so let's dive in and analyze all the relevant announcements from AMD at Computex 2025. Today's sponsor, Urcdkeys.com, is running a sale on genuine OEM Windows and Office keys. If you buy a Windows key directly from Microsoft, you can pay up to $150 depending on your region, and that's for a home edition license. But if you buy an OEM Windows 11 Pro key from Urcdkeys.com, you'll only have to pay $21 and a few cents if you use my coupon code C25, and that's for Windows 11 Pro. These keys work globally, and you'll get them within minutes. You can pay with a credit card or with PayPal. After purchasing, go to your purchased orders page and copy the key, and then on your Windows install, type in the search activate and enter your key in the appropriate field. That's it, your Windows is now activated, and you can change your wallpaper and customize Windows and all that. You can also get Office 2021 Professional Plus at a massive discount if you use my coupon code C25 for 25% off. Check the links in the description for your cheap official OEM keys from Urcdkeys.com. You know the saying, an image is worth 1,000 words? What you are seeing is, according to AMD, the next evolution in graphics fidelity. Maybe I need prescriptions or something, but what I'm seeing is an eyesore with so many shiny reflections that I feel like I'm in some sort of nightmarish house of mirrors. Now I understand that the point is to show the new FSR technology handling reflections and indirect lighting bouncing off of surfaces, but man, why does AMD always hire dev teams off of AliExpress to make these demos? You only get one chance to deliver a good first impression, and this just doesn't look good. Beyond the lackluster demo for the newly announced FSR Redstone, which will be available later this year, the technology itself is basically what Nvidia has been doing since DLSS 3.5, now with refined frame generation and neural radiance caching thrown into the mix. Don't get me wrong, I do actually think these AI technologies are useful in the right context, and actually in AMD's case, upscaling and frame gen actually fit perfectly with their APU strategy and the limitations that are inherent to integrated graphics. APUs are the home of these AI-based image generation technologies and upscalers, but these are good to have features for computationally limited scenarios. They should not be the focal point of a company that is supposed to be pushing the envelope of PC hardware. At the end of the day, nothing beats native rendering, and if Nvidia is pushing fake frames, AMD as their competitor should be going in the opposite direction, instead of copying Nvidia with worse alternatives that cost the same but have less developer support. I mean, in a vacuum, reaching parity with Nvidia in AI-based rendering techniques is obviously not a bad thing, but in the context of AMD's market position, which in the discrete GPU segment keeps shrinking every quarter, what AMD needs is a disruptive strategy, a strategy that meets gamers' needs straight on, rather than following Nvidia's fake frames narrative. And gamers have been very vocal about wanting better and cheaper hardware for native rendering. But here's the good news, FSR 4 Redstone is only available for RDNA 4 GPUs. Oh, did I say good news? I meant bad news. That's right, if you thought that you could breathe new life into your RDNA 3 based cards, like say the 6900 XT, then think again. It seems like a contradiction to be making these technologies that could help older cards perform better with current titles, but then gatekeep them from your loyal customers. But like any other corporation, AMD needs to sell new products, so I guess we can't fault them for not giving RDNA 3 owners access to FSR 4 Redstone. Of course, if Nvidia were to open up all the latest DLSS technologies to older GeForce GPUs, it would take AMD roughly 5 minutes to respond and to announce that FSR 4 Redstone will work on older RDNA generations. Because guess what? If these companies wanted to make these technologies work on older generation cards, they would. Beyond this evolution of FSR, AMD also announced the 9060 XT lower mid-range graphics cards. The 9060 XT features 32 compute units and boosts up to 3.1 GHz and is available in 8GB and 16GB of VRAM variants. At this point, I don't think I have to remind you that you really should not be buying a card with only 8GB of VRAM, be it from AMD or Nvidia or Intel, unless you only play esports titles or 2D platformers or something like that, for which the 9060 XT is probably overkill. I don't want to sound snobbish or make PC gaming an elitist hobby, but 8GB of VRAM is just not enough for today's world, especially if you want to enjoy the major AAA titles without stutters or out-of-memory crashes. Speaking of elitism, AMD claims the 9060 XT is aimed at elite 1440p gaming, which I guess means you can max out games at 1440p. We'll see about that. AMD shared a graph with internal numbers that show the 9060 XT matching Nvidia's 5060 Ti in most games, being roughly 6% faster on average versus the 5060 Ti in native rendering. With ray tracing enabled, there are even some outlier results showing 30 to 50% higher FPS and even 62% higher performance in Dragon Age The Veilguard. On paper, that's not bad at all. However, you might remember that I showed in a past video that Nvidia's 5060 Ti is barely a baseline 5060. It's more like a 5050 Ti, so AMD matching it is not exactly a great feat, unless of course it's significantly cheaper than Nvidia's offering. Strangely enough, and contrary to what you might see reported by other news outlets and YouTubers, AMD did not announce the price of the 96 XT cards. You see, after 3 months, AMD's 9070 XT is still selling well above the supposed MSRP announced by AMD. The 9070 XT was announced at $600, but the cheapest model I could find is Gigabyte's version at $730 in stock, and the ASRock Steel Legend at $700, but that one is out of stock everywhere. So it's evident by now that AMD never intended for the 9070 XT to be sold at $600. That was a lie. AMD told reviewers that the card was $600 so that they would get favorable recommendations from them, but the actual price was always meant to be at least $100 higher. AMD manipulated reviewers, so one can only assume that the MSRP of the 9060 XT is also a lie. This is how it works. If companies lie, we stop believing anything they say. So for now, the 9060 XT 16GB has no price as far as I'm concerned, and the 8GB model should be avoided, just like Nvidia's 8GB 5060 cards. So congratulations AMD, you've made your announcements even less attention-worthy for PC enthusiasts. Great job manipulating reviewers and gamers. It's working out great for you guys. At the end of the day, excluding AMD diehard fans of course, the majority of the market will see the 9060 XT as basically a 5060 Ti that's not from Nvidia. And if we look at the latest Steam hardware survey, we know what happens to Nvidia cards that are not from Nvidia. They are nowhere to be found. Yes, I know that you might have bought a graphics card from AMD, but we're talking about real-world sales figures here, and AMD keeps losing ground to Nvidia's ever-growing monopoly in DGPUs. In past years, one of the things that got AMD fans excited about AMD graphics cards was precisely the fact that they represented good value compared to Nvidia's overpriced hardware. But AMD has managed to destroy the one unique selling point they had by pricing their cards the same as Nvidia's once they actually hit shelves. And while manipulating reviewers might have gotten the 9070s some attention, in the long run, it's only going to hurt the Radeon brand even further. As far as performance is concerned, I would expect the 9060 XT to be about 40% slower than the 9070 XT given its specs, so that puts it roughly on par with last gen's 6800 non-XT and the Nvidia 3070 Ti from a couple of generations ago, which is also where Nvidia's 5060 Ti lands. If, and this is a big if, the price does turn out to be much lower than Nvidia's equivalents, the 9060 XT 16GB has the potential to be the go-to mid-range card for PC enthusiasts. I think the 9060 XT would have to cost around $250 to have any chance of selling. Wait for actual independent reviews, of course, and I would recommend keeping an eye out for reviewers who will make purchasing recommendations based on AMD's announced MSRP when review embargoes lift. If you notice any reviewer out there recommending the 9060 XTs based on them being cheaper than the Nvidia alternative, I suggest you unsubscribe from that review source immediately and let them know why you are unsubscribing. That's the only way you can prevent every review outlet from becoming a propaganda machine that deceives you. The 9060 XTs will be available on June 5th worldwide, so about a couple weeks from now. Beyond the graphics-related announcements, AMD also announced new Threadripper CPUs, codenamed Shimada Peak. These Threadrippers feature up to 96 cores and 192 threads with a 5.4 GHz boost, which is insane considering these are still consumer desktop CPUs. For things like CAD work and rendering, these should be absolute beasts, at least based on the specs. AMD showed a demo of Cinebench 2024 with the new Threadripper 9995WX versus Intel Xeon W9 3595X and the AMD chip Smoked Intels, which, to be fair to Intel, is expected as this is Intel's last generation Xeon, which only has 60 cores. Intel has recently updated their Xeon line with the 6700P, which has 86P cores, so it remains to be seen how the new Threadripper chips compare to Intel's latest Xeons. Beyond that, AMD also announced the Radeon Pro R9700, which is a GPU specifically designed for AI workloads based on RDNA 4, and it comes with 32GB of GDDR6. Not really something that's of interest to PC enthusiasts unless you are specifically doing work with ROCm. For inference, maybe this can be a consideration, but realistically for training, no one in their right mind will invest so much money in an AMD-based system for AI development at this point. For multi-core rendering though, these, along with the new Threadrippers, should be great. So how was AMD's showing at Computex 2025? I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but I think AMD continues to fail in achieving its potential, and ultimately, in my opinion, that comes down to poor leadership. The numbers speak for themselves. PC enthusiasts are not buying AMD GPUs. AMD needs to price their cards at half of the Nvidia equivalents at this point if they want to gain any market share. The market has spoken. No one wants AMD GPUs, and AMD needs to understand that and respond accordingly. The vocal minority that are AMD hardcore fans should not be confused with the wider market, which is clearly staying away from AMD products, even when the ones from Nvidia are a complete scam in terms of value. And what's truly frustrating is that AMD continues to fail to take advantage of the synergies that they have in their product portfolio, seeing as there were no new announcements regarding APUs at a time when we're seeing companies like Apple and Nvidia heavily invested in creating an ecosystem that covers all bases using in-house developed ARM-based SoCs. Where is AMD's in-house developed mini PC for AI? Why is AMD leaving it up to third parties exclusively to develop AI development boxes with their APUs? Why hasn't AMD introduced a small form factor PC developed in-house that takes advantage of the Zen plus Radeon technologies? Sort of a console killer, as these things used to be referenced to when consoles were still relevant. Remember back in 2015 when AMD announced Project Quantum, a somewhat small form factor PC developed fully in-house at AMD with an R9 Fury X2 dual GPU card? Where did the passion for awesome, innovative products like that go? Besides the desktop CPU performance dominance that AMD is enjoying, in great part thanks to years of stagnation by Intel, there's really nothing nothing about AMD that feels exciting or disruptive, and that lack of ambition is reflected in the diminishing interest from consumers in AMD products. AMD can do much better, and in my opinion, that needs to start with new and better leadership. Speaking of better leadership, next up is the renewed Intel, and I've left them for last as there's a lot to cover that goes beyond what was announced at Computex 2025. Be sure to subscribe as I'll be uploading a video on Team Blue very soon. Also, consider joining my Patreon for just a couple of dollars per month and get exclusive access to the Cortex Discord server. And share this video on your socials as that really helps my channel grow. Thanks for watching, and until the next one.